Hey art nerds, so today we are taking a look at some metallic watercolors that I've wanted to check out for a while. Grabie reached out to me and asked if I would be interested in reviewing their 36 half pan watercolor set, which I am. So they sent it to me. So we are going to unbox and swatch this watercolor palette today. Hey art nerds, today we're going to be reviewing these watercolors from Grabie. And before we dive into this review and really get into it, there's some stuff I want to disclose to you guys because this was sent care of, and I like to be really transparent when stuff is actually sent to me, because most of it is not. Most of it I do purchase out of pocket using funds from Patreon, but this is an exception. So Clara at Grabie or Grabie, and I like to think of it as Grabie because that's what I call Bowie. He's my gray baby. Clara reached out to me and asked if I'd be interested in reviewing anything from their site, and she sent me a specific link that had, like, you know, a curated selection of supplies. And since I'm in the middle of the student grade showdown, I took a look and I thought y'all might be interested in checking out the 36 metallic watercolor premium artist paint set. So that's here, and I have a special link for you guys. Since I've seen it around and have long considered reviewing it, I did stipulate that for this to work, it'd have to be an honest and fair review with my honest opinions on the product, and Clara agreed to that. So if we like what we see here today, I'll probably order a few more products from Grabie to try out, and I have a 15% off discount code for you guys if you'd like to try their products out as well. It's Becca15, so BECCA 15. And I'll have that down in the description, as well as show notes and links to everything. I also want to mention that other than this product here, I have received no compensation, and I aim to be as fair and unbiased as possible with this review. So it seems like most of what Grabie carries can be found on AliExpress from various vendors at around the same price. So if you don't feel like dealing with the long shipping times and rolling the dice with AliExpress, it seems like Grabie can be a great way to get your hands on some Himi, Giorgione, and Maggi products. In fact, I purchased a larger 48 half pan set on AliExpress a couple months ago, and it only arrived like a week ago. Whereas with the Grabie watercolors, they contacted me about 2 weeks ago and I received it today. So it seems like their shipping time is a little bit better than what you might see with AliExpress. So I'm checking out this 36 half pan metallic watercolor premium artist paint, which is $37.99 on their site. It promises to be safe and non-toxic and claims to be infused with lustrous pigment. Also says that it's easy to blend to create an endless range of colors. And these are pearlescents in here. And art nerds know I've reviewed a few metallic and pearlescent watercolors over the years, and I've even hosted a metallic watercolor showdown where I showed off and demonstrated several of them head to head. Several brands also include metallics and pearlescents like Semi-Art and the Mozart Como Rebby set. So the inclusion of mica with your watercolors is not really that strange or different. I also took a look at Artesa's metallic watercolor half pans when reviewing their metallic mixed media art kit. Generally, the gold standard for me regarding pearlescent and metallics are the fine tech watercolors, but those can be pretty pricey, and it's nice to have some cheaper options, especially if you just want to add a bit of iridescence to your card or commission. In fact, on that note, let me open this for you guys. I have the Artesa 12 metallic half pans here because I thought they looked kind of familiar. And here are the Artesa ones that we reviewed on that Unbox and Swatch live stream. Familiar, but not the same. Some similar colors, but not enough for me to say these were probably manufactured by the same company. Let's talk about the packaging. This arrived in a tightly taped up plastic bag. Inside the bag was a box. Inside the box was another plastic bag with this metal tin inside it. I am a sucker for these kind of watercolor-esque, beautiful pastel watercolor tins. Having grown up in the US where for the longest time watercolor came in a black tin and that was it, I'm really charmed by like cute watercolor aesthetics. I mean, I'm never so charmed that I want it to be cute over functional, but I am a sucker for functional and cute. So on the outside of this metal tin, it says saturated and bright, sun exposure, transparent and pure, smooth and 36 colors, sweet watercolor. There is nothing on the back, and it is a pretty large tin for 36 colors. So typically in the Student Grade Showdown, we take a look at 46, 48 color sets. Generally, because I tried it with the Student Grade Showdown, I'm trying to get the largest range I can. And those are crammed into a box about this size. So this does take up a fair amount of desk space. It is a fairly sturdy metal tin with a hinge. There is absolutely nothing, not even a swatch sheet on this side, so you're gonna have to provide your own swatch sheet. And then we got some free foam. How lucky for, well, it was all free today, but some free foam. How lucky. And I'm going to do the weird thing. I'm going to do the smell test because the Artesa metallics smell funny, and I want to see if these also smell funny. So give me a I mean, if you get your nose like right up in them, you can smell something, but when I opened the Artesa tin, it was like immediate smell wafting out of it. So we'll see if like it releases an aroma. I've noticed that with cheaper watercolors like the Semi-Art ones and the Xylee W ones, they do have kind of a smell to them, kind of like cheaper alcohol markers have a more odoriferous aroma to them than their more expensive counterparts. So these are not like noxious in your face, which is good because I'm pretty sensitive to smells and I'm pretty prone to migraines. So if it bothers me, I assume that some of you guys watching, it might bother y'all. And so far, it isn't bothering me. And here are our 36 half pans of lustrous, glorious watercolor. It is in a plastic tin. It doesn't look like the plastic tin. A plastic liner. It doesn't look like the plastic liner is meant to be removed, but it does take up a lot of space. They could have really condensed this just by magneting them next to each other. They are fairly easy to remove from the plastic liner itself if you wanted to put this in a smaller palette or just take a couple for travel. And they are standard size half pans, and to me they look like they are liquid poured rather than extruded little chiclets of sorrow and pain. Now, some of them, this is not as art aesthetic as some people might like because some of them have started to crack, some of them do have bubbles, some of them have started to glaze. Some of them have irregularities. That doesn't bother me at all. In fact, that's typically a sign of something that was poured, because extruded watercolors are not going to change shape as the water or the liquid in them evaporates. There is a little bit of like paint or something overflow onto these. Like this has some of this color in it, not a big deal. This has some white on it, and I'm not super sure where that's coming from, but hopefully that should clean up, and it should just be a cosmetic thing and not like an actual handling problem. So other than our 36 paints, we also receive one unsharpened, unlabeled pencil. I'll probably be skipping the pencil since I'm a mechanical pencil kind of gal. But I do like it when kits include a lot of stuff in them so that you can get painting right away. A super small Shanghai Hubei watercolor brush. Is this? I don't know. I'd have to remove the sizing to see how good a quality the actual brush is. I mean, it feels kind of cheap, but you know, gotta remove the sizing. And a pretty standard inexpensive water brush so you can get painting right away. We also receive a small eraser, and we also get a little bitty brush that, not a little bitty brush, a little bitty sponge that we could clean our water brush on. So those of you who have watched ever so many of my watercolor showdown unbox and swatches, first off, thanks for watching. Thanks for hanging out with me. Second of all, y'all know I'm not like a big fan of water brushes. So what I'm going to do with this one is I'm just going to fill it with water and see if we have any leaking issues, that kind of general stuff. But for the swatching, I want to give these watercolors the best, fairest chance at success possible. So I am going to swatch these on a cotton rag paper using a watercolor brush that I really like. And I misspoke a little bit earlier. I skipped a step in terms of the packaging. So it came in a tape wrap, very tape wrap plastic bag. Inside that was a box. Inside that was a mailer. Inside that was a plastic sleeve. And inside that was our metal tin. And to be real, that's a lot of packaging. We probably could have just gone with the box. Something to think about, Grabie in the future, a little bit less waste. That is something I do tend to talk about on the channel a lot. I will say though, I am pleased-ish that these are not actually individually wrapped. Sometimes that can be a good thing because it can help prevent you know, the evaporation of the moisture in the half pans, but often companies just go overboard and really overwrap. I'm talking like plastic and paper and foil, and you don't really need all that. So kudos to you for not like over wrapping these. And I know these are actually made by a different manufacturer that Grabie is just distributing and selling these, but I'm still happy to see that it's not like totally overpackaged on the inside, though we did have that foam insert. Whoo, man. So a good solution for the foam insert would just be some paper on the inside that would be recyclable and easy to get rid of. So since I'm treating this as part of my student grade showdown, I am going to hold it to the same standards and put it through almost all of the same tests that I would normally put student grade watercolors through. I would consider these to be special effects watercolor, which have kind of a special place in my heart, in my studio, and on my palette. It's not something I use all the time because frankly, special effects watercolors don't show up the best when you're scanning them, but they're great for video and they're great for in-person, real-world art. So commissions, cards, that sort of thing. And plus, they just add a lot of fun sparkle. So what I'm going to be looking at today is we're going to be doing our swatch test. We're going to wash those out to see how the mica in them kind of disperses. We're going to do a little bit of color mixing, mostly because they promise that you can mix colors with these. So I might do like a rainbow road with them just to see how well they blend together. I'm not really going to bother with sort of layering or glazing because frankly, with these kind of special effects colors, you mostly want to limit that because it just doesn't turn out all that well. Even with really good brands, you want to kind of limit how many layers and how much glazing you do because they do have a tendency to reactivate. So that's not something I'm going to be looking at necessarily today. I am, however, going to do the wet into wet test, mostly because I want to see, I've never done that with pearlescent watercolors. I think it would be really pretty. So it's just something I'd like to see. I'm just doing it for myself. I mean, I don't know about you guys. And I'm also going to compare these against some other brands that include pearlescence. Now, a lot of my, like most of my pearlescent and metallic watercolors are still packed away from moving. So what I'm going to do is I'm also going to grab some clips from other videos and include those just so you guys can kind of have that visual reference and be able to compare. So today we are swatching, like we always do, on the Blick Studio Cold Press Cotton Rag watercolor paper. No affiliation. I happen to really like Dick Blick, but zero affiliation. But this is a block bound cotton rag watercolor paper. So it's going to give these paints the best chance at performance possible, which is important to me because I want to be really fair when I'm reviewing these sort of inexpensive watercolors. What I'm also going to use for this test is I'm going to make 3 rows and we're going to do 12 colors per row, and we're going to test opacity using an alcohol marker, a Copic Chow. I finally bought one just for the student grade showdown, and while there are sometimes color reactivation issues with the marker and with watercolors, typically alcohol markers are not water reactive. They're not going to be resoluble in water, and it's going to allow us to actually see how opaque these colors are without causing a resist. In the past, I've used like pigment markers for this, and I found that the pigment can sometimes cause a bit of a resist with that watercolor, so you can't really tell how opaque the colors actually are. This allows me to judge it a little bit more fairly. Oh, and since we are working with special effects watercolors, we do actually want to see a fair amount of opacity from the pearlescence and the mica in them. So that's something we're going to be looking for. How much color oomph and how much pearlescent oomph. How present are both the colors and the pearl in these watercolors? So I decided to do 4 rows instead of 3 since we've got 4 rows of paint here, and I thought it would just be easier to keep track and for you guys to keep track as well. So these take a while to activate and they take quite a bit of water to do so. So you've got to really let that water soak in because you're going to get a lot better payoff. So you know how normally for these I would just spritz it and then we could start painting a couple minutes later. You got to really give that water a chance to soak in, but once it does, you get a lot of shimmer and color. And if you really let it soak up the water, you get a lot of color and shine payoff. And it's not just white mica, there's also some iridescence in here. They do dry less pretty and intense than they were wet. These would probably look good on black paper. I'm gonna have to do a field test. I'm thinking a butterfly on the Stonehenge black. I'm also showing you guys the water just so you guys can see how much iridescence is in the water. You wanna make sure you clean your rinse cup out really, really well after using these kind of watercolors so that you don't pollute your other watercolors. And I do like the color selection, and there's several really pretty colors, but I feel like the $38 price point is pretty high for this type of watercolor, especially compared to some of the other student grade watercolors that I've reviewed. So this is the main sticking point for me with this palette, is just the price point. The other big sticking point for me is that there's several colors that are basically duplicates of each other, and I really would have liked to have seen different types of mica used, different flake sizes used, different colors of mica used, different special effects, just anything to make those base colors a little bit more special and a little bit more interesting. One thing I really want to reiterate is that when you are using these, make sure you really let them soak up the water. Not only did I spritz them several times, but I also drip dropped water on them individually because they do have a tendency to dry out kind of quickly. But once you get them saturated, then the color payoff is really pretty good. I also like the color selection. I like how it seems like with a lot of these colors and a lot of the selection, we're graduating. So pearl white, iridescent pearl white, light gold gold, medium gold, copper, darker copper, maybe like a bronze color, kind of going through the same things with the pinks and the purples, that sort of thing. I would have loved to have seen more chameleon and iridescent colors in here. We've got a couple of chameleon colors, but I know that chameleon pigments are they're not prohibitively expensive. They're not as expensive as, say, using like mineral pigments. So I think chameleon pigments would really add a lot to this and make it a lot more fun. But I might be kind of spoiled because one of my friends makes homemade watercolors and she really focuses on these like special effects and shift colors, which are really cool. So I might be like a little spoiled by that. So while this dries, we're actually going to do a Rainbow Road blend test where I go through, and I got to think about this strategically because they're not necessarily in the order I would put them in to do like a perfect blend Rainbow Road. So I'm trying to decide if I want to go down and over, down and like snake it, or if I want to go across and then down, across and then down. But I think I'm going to go down and then over and snake it across. With the Rainbow Road test, I also realized I would have liked more impact colors like yellows, stronger greens, stronger blues. We have a lot of purples and grays and kind of sage colors in this set. These did a pretty good job blending with the Rainbow Road. Some are a little bit better than others. You can't quite see the paper texture with some of these colors, whereas some of them have some pretty nice, interesting granulation as well. It probably has to do with the dyes and pigments that they're using for the base color, as well as how finely granulated the mica flakes actually are. Some of them have slightly larger mica flakes. Some of them have really finely granulated mica flakes. I actually like to see that kind of difference between the mica flakes because it adds, I think, an extra layer of usability. Like if you were painting an ice princess, you might want some of the larger flakes. Whereas if you were just adding a little bit of glitter, a little accent here on a commission, just to kind of make the eyes pop out a little bit more, you might want something a little bit more subtle. So next, I'm going to do a little bit, just a little bit of color mixing. We don't exactly have our standard RGB, you know, a good blue, a good red, a good yellow. We don't really have that. So I'm just gonna kind of throw some colors together and see how well they mix, or if they tend to just fall out of solution and totally desaturate once we've added enough water. Because that is something I have noticed with less expensive watercolors, is that when you add water, they have a tendency to fall apart. Colors in this set do mix decently well, although I don't have quite the color selection I would have liked for color mixing. But I think more interesting inclusions like a gold would make for some really interesting and pretty mixes. I'm looking for more iridescent, more chameleon, a different silver flake, and a larger gold flake would make for some really great mixings that would allow you to mix a variety of special effect glitter colors. And a holo mix would be really fun too. That said, these colors seem to get used up fast. You guys can already see the pretty large divots in these. That's not untypical for hand poured watercolors. So I'm not too pleased with how these colors mix, but there's really only one true test for that, our wet into wet test. So this is my first time doing a wet into wet test with metallic and special effects watercolors. And one of the first things I noticed is that the non-metallics in this set, so just the mica colors, don't have much of a color punch, especially with this much water. They would probably benefit from being used on colored surfaces and in saturation. However, the metallics have much more of a color punch, and it would have been really fun to see more of a color punch or maybe more special effects become apparent as we add more water and they kind of dilute out and they have the space to actually shine. So I will say that these colors don't really have a whole lot of a color punch, at least the ones that are like supposed to be a color, like the greens and some of the pinks. Once you add water, they kind of just turn to not a whole lot of anything. However, the gold has a really pretty flake and the copper. So the metallics do pretty well. The color plus mica, not so well. So now I want to talk about some comparable watercolors, and since I don't have everything on hand right away, I'm also going to include some voiced over snippets just to give you guys a good idea of what I'm talking about. So definitely I think the Arteza metallic watercolors are pretty similar to these. In fact, at first I kind of wondered if maybe they were by the same original manufacturer, since Grabie is just selling them. They're just a distributor and they carry several different brands. I did try to find out what brand this is. I have not had much luck, but I'll keep digging. If you guys know, let me know down in the comments below. That would be a big help. But I should have that info for you guys before we do the field test. So one thing I definitely noticed as soon as I opened this palette again is and I'm talking about the Arteza palette here, is I got this really like noxious scent of chemicals. So that's definitely something to keep in mind if you're sensitive to those kind of strong chemically smells. This palette is not going to be a good fit for you. This one, I really only noticed it when I was like really on top of it. When I was doing the Rainbow Road and I was really close to the palette itself, I could smell it a little bit, but it wasn't nearly as overwhelming as the Arteza watercolors themselves. So I have a full swatch of this over on the Metallic Mixed Media Unbox and Swatch. Both the live stream or the time-lapse one should have it. But this is what the colors look like on black paper. And this is what they look like on the included swatch sheet. They're not nearly as impressive on the white paper as they are on the black paper. Now, I don't know where my Stonehenge Black Aqua is. I apologize. I am going to do the field test for this palette though on black paper, even if I have to go run to Michael's and get another pad of it. So that should give us a really good idea of how well these handle on black paper. But I think if the colors are as pretty as they are on the white paper here, on the black paper, they should really be pretty standout and outstanding. Another palette I kind of thought of when I was reviewing these is the Semi-Art palette. And not in terms of quality. I think these are a lot better. These are a lot easier to work with, that's for sure, than the Semi-Art watercolors. But just the fact that the Semi-Art palette does come with like half the palette almost are these shimmer effects colors. But these things are so difficult to activate. They have very, very little color payoff, not a lot of color oomph, and frankly, they're all just using the same white mica with maybe a dye or some other additive to add color. There isn't really any variation with the Semi-Art set. Now, the Semi-Art set is quite a bit cheaper for the number of half pans you get, but I would not say it's worth the price I paid for it originally. It was around $30, and I think I overpaid for this. This is $37, and I do think that's a little bit high. I think Grabie could come down a little bit on the price point, and that would make it more attractive and more competitive. But I do understand that since they're a distributor, that might not be an option, and that might be a problem with the original manufacturer and how they're setting the price. And then I also thought, I mean, if you're going to talk about pearlescent colors, you should talk about pearlescent colors. And these aren't the fine text that everybody loves. This is like the knockoff fine tech. Boy, do I use that color a lot. These are kind of what I think of when I'm thinking of pearlescent colors. I have a bunch of their metallics, and I have some of the nicer fine tech brands metallics as well. And these are really nice, but they're also kind of expensive for what they are. A little will last you a really long time. I've had this palette for like 5 years now, and while I don't use it all the time, I've used it quite a bit. And I feel like I did use up more of this color just today than, you know, kind of what we've seen here. This palette also has some really good golds, but it doesn't have nearly the color selection as this one here, and they're about the same price. So I love the fine tech pearlescent colors. I use this palette, but it is kind of expensive. And if you just want to add a little bit of shimmer to a card or to a commission, this might be a better way to go. You might be a little bit happier with it. I also want to compare this to the Kuretake Gensai Tambi Starry Skies, and I'll include the clips for that, as well as the Mozart Como Grabie palette, which I happen to really love. They have a bunch of pearlescent colors in there that I don't really use a whole lot. So I do tend to be kind of picky when it comes to my pearlescent colors and which ones I like and which ones I recommend. And I'm also going to include some clips from that metallic watercolor showdown in case you guys are looking for even more pearlescent and metallic options. This very old clip is from the Kuretake Pearlescent palette, and while looking for clips for this video, I really became impressed at how much my videography has improved. So this palette was sent to me by Kabocha, and honestly, I wasn't that impressed with the color payoff for these. I'm assuming these are the same kind of paint formulation as the Gensai Tambi set, and there's just not a lot here. These are really for like at the very end of a painting, adding just a little hint of detail, and I am so sorry for this videography. It makes you really appreciate how far we've come though. Sometimes you gotta look at where you came from in the past to appreciate where you are right now. This is from my Mozart Como Grabie review, and I really like this palette. You guys see me use this palette all the time. This is a 40 whole pan palette, and there are some pearlescents and some neon, so that's why I thought to include this. Now, I do talk about most of these in that big metallic overview I did a couple years ago, and I'm gonna have clips from that as well, but if you're looking for some good metallic paints, I'd recommend you check that out. So here are swatches of the normal colors, and then I'm swatching the special effect colors here. And doesn't this make you guys appreciate the improved lighting and the improved placement of the camera and the improved editing in general? I think these were recorded in SD, and I'm swatching with a Waterbrush because that's what I used to swatch with a lot of the time, and that's one of the reasons I don't swatch with them anymore, is that it just the water control became such an issue that I felt like I wasn't really fairly reviewing paints when I was using a water brush. So I don't really use the pearlescence or the special effects colors in this palette. I feel like this is like a Gensai Tambi style or a Gensai style palette where it really benefits with origami, and those kind of special effect colors are really fun with origami watercolor, but this is just not a palette that I typically use when I'm doing origami. So the pearlescence and the metallics in this palette are just something that I don't really use. Now they do have a lot of color payoff, but they tended to stay in the very safe range of metallics and mica edition pearlescence, and no iridescence, no chameleon colors, no hollow colors. And gosh, looking at these clips, it makes me really wish someone other than my buddy Kabocha, who isn't making them to sell, would make special effect watercolors for fun, just for these kind of purposes. I know Finetech has some chameleon and special effect watercolors, and I have some of them, but I'm frankly not really that impressed. And I also have a supervision review coming up of their new Mica Plus Rock collection. So these are Yasutomo pearlescent paints, also sent to me by Kabocha. Kabocha sent me a bunch of pearlescent paints at one point, and I actually liked these better. Actually, no, these are the Artist Loft ones, not the Yasutomo ones. These are the Artist Loft ones, and I actually like these better than the Kuretake for the color payoff and the color selection, but pretty much all of these are, for the most part, mica plus a color. So not a whole lot of interest there. But like I was saying, I do have a review of the new Supervision colors coming up for you guys that I'm really excited about. And looking at these clips also makes me really appreciate the Grabie palette a lot more, because they do have some interesting inclusions. Like the gold flake is an interesting inclusion, and the chameleon colors are an interesting inclusion. So those are the Mozart Komorebi colors, one more time laid out so you guys can see there's not actually a lot besides the sort of metallics, the bronzes and the coppers and the golds and the silvers and the pearlescent. There's a blue, a green, and a purple. That's not that exciting. And this is from my big metallic comparison review, I think. I've done a couple of them over the years. This might be the just metallic watercolors one, whereas I have like an everything I could get my hands on that's metallic, and I'll link both of those. I'll link everything for you guys down in the description below. But this is, man, watching my old videos is such a blast from the past. Like I've always said I wasn't gonna do like a reaction video because this channel just isn't popular enough for a reaction video to be necessary, but like just looking at how much everything has changed and how I handle things differently, it's kind of tempting. So I was using 3 colors in this one to really demonstrate how metallics and iridescence can actually affect what you're painting on top of. And I'm using alcohol markers in this instance because in general they're not water reactive. These are the Finetec Pearlescents that I showed you guys. These have a way better. So when it comes to color and mica, these are just packed. They do take a while to activate. So you really want to like spritz them with water and then let the water sit for a while and then really zhuzh the brush on top of it. And you don't really want to use a soft brush with these. I like to use a stiffer synthetic with these because you can pick up more of that color. But they do have a pretty good color payoff for these. Now the 2 white circles are actually official Finetec. Alvin makes a Finetec line, and then there's the Finetec that come from Germany, and the 2 on the right in the white circles are actual Finetec from Germany, and those are supposed to be a whole lot better, although frankly I just can't necessarily tell the difference. There's a price difference and there's an accessibility difference, but in terms of everyday usage and handling, I can't really tell a difference. And next, I'm going to take a look at the Kuretake Gansai Tambi Starry Sky set. So this is a gold, silver, and white pearlescent palette. And this is all shown in full in one of my many metallic overviews that'll be linked down in the description below. But these are Gansai style paints, and the color payoff is okay, but I don't think the color payoff for these is as good as the Finetec. Now, one of the things this really makes me appreciate about the Grabie set is that gold flake. Now, there's only one of the big gold flake, but the gold flake actually really reminds me of Winsor & Newton's gold ink, which uses sort of an alcohol solution, and it actually uses bronze particles in it. So it uses an alcohol solution so that the bronze won't turn in the water. And I just happen to really like it. I used to use it really often. It is one of the best gold paints I've ever used. If I really want a gold effect, that's what I would generally grab for. And here's the full, well, here's a clip from the full Gansai Tambi review. So again, all of those will be linked down below. But all of these are really making me appreciate that Grabie palette, because the Grabie palette actually has a gold flake and a chameleon. And most of these metallic pearlescent sets are just relying on mica. It's just mica and a dye, and frankly they all start feeling kind of the same. It's one of the reasons I typically don't review a lot of these sort of pearlescent palettes, is because it's really just going to come down to your preferences and formulation. Now that said, my buddy Kabocha, who came onto the channel and showed us how she makes handmade watercolors, makes a lot of really cool, fun special effects and chameleon watercolors. Part of me wishes that she would offer them for sale, and part of me also would not wish that hustle on anyone. But that's my other basis for comparison, is getting to play around with these really cool handmade bespoke watercolors made by a watercolor artist who is making paints that specifically cater to her interest. I mean, you can't really get much better than that when you have someone who's making this thing to fill a need that they feel is in the market. And then finally, I have kind of a demonstration where, and I did a tutorial a while back on how to paint betta fish on black paper using metallic paints, and I also used the Hydrocolor watercolors in this. And I also have a fine tech versus hydrocolor review if you guys are interested. So while I don't do it very often anymore, I have reviewed a lot of pearlescent, mica, and special effects watercolor in the past. So I am kind of coming back from a standpoint of someone who has used them. Typically I use them more often in work that would be, you know, commission work or something that would be seen in real life, because I feel like these sort of special effects are really the most special when they're viewed in real life. But with the fine techs, you really got to get them wet, let the water sit and saturate in. And then for this illustration, I couldn't really do a lot of mixing beforehand. I found it was best if I worked quick, wet into wet, and let them mix on the paper. And that's what I want to attempt with the Grabie watercolors for the field test. I want to paint a butterfly. I think a butterfly. I might go with a flower, but I'm probably going to go with a butterfly using these techniques on this same paper and see if they work for that. So I do feel like a lot of these special effects watercolors are very appealing for card makers and for brush calligraphers and for hand letterers and for people who are making these sort of pieces that are very reliant just on that individual color. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And I'm trying to kind of judge these by that viewpoint, by that standpoint. These Grabie watercolors are definitely going to be less expensive than even the cheap Alvin fine techs. So they might be a little bit more accessible for you and your budget. Don't plan on testing out everything in this art kit. I tend to be very picky about my erasers, and this one feels it's probably fine. It just feels a little bit like dusty to me, and I don't really care for that myself. I'm not a big like pink pearl or gum eraser kind of person. I prefer the white vinyl erasers personally. I'm also not a big wooden pencil person either. I'm a mechanical pencil kind of gal. So I think what I am going to test is I am going to test the included Waterbrush. Talk about it a little bit. I'm also admittedly not really a Waterbrush kind of person. I really just wanted this set for the colors themselves. So that's why they got pretty much all of the limelight. But I did want to see, I mean, with Waterbrushes, basically a cheap one is almost as good as an expensive one, so long as the cheap one doesn't have like a catastrophic failure where it leaks or the cap doesn't go on properly. The plastic does feel really thin on this. Gonna go ahead and uncap it. Looks like a medium brush. It doesn't seem to have any sizing on it. The brush will post to the back, and we do need to unscrew it lefty-loosey. It does not have one of those little black tabs in there that would allow you to, say, fill it and travel with it in two separate pieces. So all that's really left with this is to fill it and see if it leaks. So I filled it with water, screwed the cap on pretty good. Doesn't seem to be any leaking along where we actually screw it in. So honestly, it seems like a pretty functional, inexpensive water brush. What are the pros and cons of the Saturated and Bright Sun Exposure Transparent and Pure Smooth and Smooth 36 Color Suite Watercolor Palette? Let's start with the pros. Let's start with some positive notes. So once activated, you do get a lot of color. I mean, with the Semi Arts, you had to scrub and scrub and scrub and scrub. They would not release the color. And these don't smell as strongly as the Arteza metallic watercolors either, which is a bigger deal than you might expect, especially if you are sensitive to strong smells. And the tin itself is pretty stylish and cute. I can also create some interesting color mixes, especially using that gold flake. You can get some really pretty color mixes with that. Sparkly. So what are the cons? Well, these really take a while to activate, and you have to keep adding water, and they dry out fast. And while that might not seem like a big deal, if you are trying to paint a larger thing, or if you're trying to cover an area with glitter and glimmer, these are going to be a little bit more challenging. But frankly, when are you going to use all 36 of the glittery colors in one illustration? You're probably going to use like 5, and it's a lot easier to keep 5 activated. They kind of turn to nothing if you add them to a really wet sheet of paper. But then again, iridescent watercolors really aren't meant to have a ton of color impact once they've diffused. They do tend to kind of just leave like a shiny, misty sort of effect. These get used up fast. I think that's my biggest complaint with these. These were new when they arrived today, and they're already like big chunks of them are missing, except for this one, which I couldn't get activated, which is another kind of con. And there are some duplicate colors, or colors that are very, very similar. Let me show you guys what I'm talking about. Okay, so this and this, basically the same color. This and this is a little bit cooler, but they're very, very similar. Some of these are really similar. Some of the greens are pretty similar. I mean, even just adding like a duochrome effect or a gold instead of a pale mica would be great. These two are basically the same color. This color up here fits in with these without too much difference. So there's a lot of very similar colors that are taking up space in the palette. And there's some colors that I would have liked to have seen included. Like we have a really gorgeous electric blue, but we don't really have any vibrant greens or any vibrant yellows or even any vibrant reds. We have a kind of orange enough to pass for orange. We've got a lot of pinks and we've got a lot of purples and we've got a lot of teals, but we don't have like a true grass electric green. And that would have been really exciting to see. Is like this electric blue, we get an electric yellow, red, and green that would really pop. So what's the verdict on these shiny, shimmering watercolors sent to me by Grabie? I've been considering buying this palette for a while, and I hadn't really gotten to the metallics in the Student Grade Showdown, so I would have purchased this palette anyway. I personally don't think it offers quite as much color impact as I would like, but this opinion may change after painting something on painting something on black paper during the field test. While I mostly like the color selection, there are several colors that are really similar without enough variation, say flake size or flake color or duochrome effects, to justifying having both or all three of them in the palette itself. And I needed to reactivate this palette frequently, which was kind of frustrating because I would have to stop what I was doing and put a drop of water on each, even though I had literally just spritzed it. And some colors don't really want to activate at all, like this one here. That said, I really like the color selection minus the duplicates, and I'd love to see a palette with a few strong greens, reds, and yellows. Not necessarily gold. A duochrome yellow would be awesome. Grabie also has the 48 half pan set I showed y'all at the top of the video, as well as several other intriguing art supplies. So I'll definitely consider shopping with them again the next time I'm looking for something fun and unusual, but I don't want to wait 2 months for AliExpress to deliver it. So Grabie got back to me after Christmas and they asked, and this is actually kind of after the fact because this didn't come up at all before they actually sent me the product. They asked if I could color this card that they've included. Now I am going to do that, but I want to have some caveats. So this is a watercolor set, as you guys are well aware. This is a coded postcard. It is not going to accept watercolor in any way that would actually look good for the watercolor or for the card itself. So what I think I'm going to do with this is I think I'm going to color it with alcohol markers, which is not quite in the spirit of what they had in mind, but this is not going to be receptive to water. I'm familiar with this kind of finish. I use it on my mood cards and it's not going to take watercolor. It might take alcohol markers though. So I wanted to point that out to you guys since this is indeed a totally honest review. I wanted to be completely transparent with you guys. Generally, when I purchase these sort of things out of my own pocket, these kind of promotional pack-ins, I don't color them. I would rather spend my time coloring my art. But since they asked, I figured I would go ahead and do that and let you know. So I'm actually not going to include the coloring as part of this video because I'm going to be using alcohol markers on it. But I will make sure I have this card colored when I check in with you guys next. So I have done my duty and I colored the May the Art Be With You card from Grabie. I will say that whatever this is not receptive to alcohol markers either. So if they want the people that they work with to color these cards and include them, it would be great if you just sent an uncoated stock. That would actually work a lot better with more a wider variety of art supplies, because this matte finish, it makes it a lot more difficult to color it with even alcohol markers, which will color on almost anything. So this 36 half pan set of watercolors was sent to me by Grabie for the purposes of reviewing. I'll have a link down in the description for you guys if you're interested in checking out yourself. Make sure you use my code BECCA15 if you'd like 15% off. And I need to remember to tag Grabie Official with the hashtag Let's Grabie with this. So anyway, I will be doing a field test of this in the near future, so keep an eye out for that. I think I'm going to paint a butterfly using these beautiful iridescent watercolors. Before I ask you guys what you think of the Grabie 36 half pan watercolor palette, I did want to show you guys. So I made a color map the other night. I really saturated those colors. So I was able to pick up a lot more color than I have been able to previously. And I think this reflects just so much better on these watercolors. I don't know why the initial swatches were not particularly impressive. I don't know. But I am definitely liking them a whole lot better, and I kind of revised my opinion a little bit. I do still feel like the price point is kind of high. I'd like to see them lower it just a little bit, but I've also been working with the Supervision Chameleon watercolors, and I find that these are pretty comparably saturated to those, just at a lower price point. So I don't know, I'm really looking forward to doing the field test for you guys. I found my Stonehenge black aqua watercolor paper, so I'm going to do a beautiful butterfly for y'all. I hope you guys will keep an eye out for that. I do want to flash the card they asked me to color again, and again remind you guys, Grabie, if you're watching this, the finish you have on this makes this really hard to color. So if you're going to ask artists to color the cards in the future, I would recommend next time you get these printed up, no kind of coating on the front, because it doesn't help at all. So one other thing I want to point out with these watercolors is that they have a tendency, anytime I turn it off, and I'll take the hit, I'll make the sacrifice, they're not secured in there. So if you want to travel with these, if you want to bring these with you, I would tape these down using some double stick tape. So who might these watercolors be for? I could see these being something that hand letters, brush calligraphers might really enjoy. There's a lot of sparkle and a fair amount of color payoff with these watercolors once you finally get them fully working, as I showed you guys. And gosh, it is busy. I decided to do the end cap in the beginning in my front yard, just because it looks like it wants to rain, and I thought a change of environment might be nice, and I did not realize how busy it would be in the middle of the day on a Tuesday, but it's pretty dang busy. So you might want to secure these down with some double stick tape or some washi tape if you're going to travel with them. I've had to refigure out where these go several times, so I should be able to figure this out, but it was enough of that I wanted to point it out to you guys. Now, if you fit a pad of watercolor paper in here, or if you keep that foam, that won't happen. That's why they included the foam to begin with. Or you can tape these down and it won't be an issue. So I honestly, doing the map, I'm so glad I did the map. Usually I do this before I do the field test, and I include it with the field test, but it really kind of changes how I feel about these. This handled so much better than the initial tests. I don't know what was up with the initial test. I don't know if they had some kind of film on them, or all the gum arabic had settled to the top, or what, and it just took a while to remove it. But I'm really glad that they're performing a lot better, and I'm really glad I chose to include that. Something else I want to point out is that these are kind of soft. You can dent them with your nail, which it is not a big deal. It just kind of points towards these were probably poured, not extruded. And those of you who watch a lot of my reviews know that I really do prefer poured watercolors over extruded for the most part. They just tend to reactivate a little bit quicker. So where does this fall in the student grade showdown? Because these are metallics. These are kind of an unusual thing. Well, I am reviewing the 48 pan palette from the same manufacturer as this that I purchased out of pocket off of AliExpress, and I think that'll give me a better idea of how the brand is in general. So hopefully you guys will keep an eye out for that. So if you are new here, it would really mean a lot to me if you took a moment to hit the subscribe button and click the bell notification to let YouTube know that you want to hear more from me. I want to also point out that after talking to YouTube about why these views don't circulate as widely as I would like them to, the vast majority of you who are watching my stuff, you guys came here from search. Hi, welcome, it's good to see you. I make a lot of comic and watercolor content. I think you'll really like it. Most of y'all are not subscribed, so if you like what you see here, don't rely on YouTube to recommend it. Go ahead and subscribe. And that most of the people who are subscribed either don't have bell notifications turned on, or they do, but they don't have YouTube notifications turned on. So if you don't have YouTube notifications on, but you have bell notifications for me turned on, you're not gonna get any notifications. So if you want those notifications, if you're kind of relying on those to see when I update, please make sure you have the bell turned on and you also have YouTube notifications on. And if you don't want any of those notifications whatsoever, I do a weekly Patreon update where I link everything that I worked on that week, including Twitter threads. Sometimes I do Twitter tutorials, and it's at patreon.com/notisoup, and my Patreon updates are free. So thank you guys so much for watching. I really enjoyed having a chance to check these out, and thank you to Grabie to reaching out to me and asking if I would be interested in checking out one of their products. I really appreciate it, and these occasional care of videos really help the channel continue, as does the support of my awesome patrons on Patreon. You'll see their names listed now.